Dear viewers, I'm Leon Strous, General Co-Chair of the IFIP IoT conference that is taking place on 4 and 5 November this year. It is my pleasure to have a chat with Professor Schahram Dustdar from the Vienna University Technology, one of our keynote speakers. Professor Dustdar, please introduce yourself and tell us what your current IoT research interests are.
I work at the Technical University in Vienna as a full professor, and I'm heading the distributed systems group here. And my current research focus is looking at the space of IoT, software services, and people and how they interact with each other.
Great. An interesting question in my perspective is, what is your best experience with an IoT application?
So I began my IoT journey some over 10 years ago or so. There, at that point in time, we had a project with a major company in Dubai. And for that, I was working on, we were developing, looking at IoT and its relationship to cloud computing, smart cities, and smart buildings. And that was pretty interesting as an experience, and also to learn how we can actually create context-dependent decision-making in the overall IoT system.
Great. And maybe following up on that, what is, in your view, the most interesting recent development with respect to IoT?
Well, I think that actually connecting IoT not only with the cloud, but also with all the other pieces of technology that we have in this ecosystem, such as the edge computing infrastructure, the fog computing infrastructure, spiced with artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think that's the most interesting part of the recent developments.
And this leads, of course, to questions: what should be the focus of researchers? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yes, so I think that actually our responsibility is to cross multiple domains. And in particular, these days with COVID all over the world, we face a lot of challenges, and those challenges, they go across different disciplines, and they also go across different vertical system boundaries. So such as logistics, healthcare, mobility, and those are really prime examples of how IoT can contribute. But not only if you look at IoT from isolation and look at it from a pure, let's say, IoT sensor networks type of perspective, but if you connect that to the overall picture of how it relates to the edge and to the cloud infrastructure as well.
Looking at the question of what kind of what topic or application area would need immediate or more attention, could you single out some of the examples you mentioned just previously?
Yeah, for example, if you look at the topic of healthcare, healthcare is a very big area which encompasses, of course, the situation regarding vaccination and you know, the COVID situation, for example. That's a very immediate need, but also well-being in general, right? So, and these aspect and perspective of looking at healthcare perspective of a society of in a certain region, for example, requires us to actually look at this question holistically. So combining it with social welfare, status, mobility patterns, logistic patterns, and these are all interrelated. And that, I think, is the challenge of the next decades to come, to actually think outside the traditional box of boundaries that we have created in the past.
Thank you. Looking at the complexity of IoT with all the many aspects and stakeholders and people responsible, who is actually responsible for a responsible IoT?
We. We are responsible. We meaning computer scientists of all colors and shapes and forms. So the researchers and also IT people in general. So I think that those days where IoT was delegated to, let's say, electrical engineers in a broad sense, or just, you know, some sensor type people, is over. We need to make much better use of IoT technologies in the overall scheme of information and communication technologies.
Following up on that, what are the needs to educate and train the IoT workforce?
I think what is really important is to think outside of traditional silos. And that is easily said, but it's very hard to do because we need to think outside the boxes of these traditional professional boundaries on the one hand, but also outside the boundaries of disciplines that we have learned during our education.
Thank you. And the tricky question is, of course, do you feel that this is currently sufficiently addressed, or do we have to improve?
I think there is space for improvement, I would say. we can improve.
Which
definitely.
is material for discussing at a conference, definitely.
Exactly.
Talking about the conference, can you give us a teaser what your keynote will be about? Of course, there's information on the website, which I will come back to later, but could you give us a teaser?
Yeah, so I think one of the fundamental assumptions which I have, which many people do not necessarily have, is that I look at ecosystems composed of people, software, services, and things. So my basic assumption is that these three are the building blocks of systems. And I will look at this from a holistic perspective and then decompose it into what I believe in that point in time is really necessary in order to create sustainable systems, which actually help to address problems in society and going across disciplines. This is what I will attempt to do.
Great. Do you have any final messages for this interview before we start heading towards the conference?
Well, I would like to say something that people should avoid and people should focus on maybe as scientists and researchers. I think that we need to avoid a lack of clarity. So in other words, we need to attempt to develop a clearer picture and avoid working in isolation on little problems. And we should focus on addressing really pressing societal issues and contribute really to the cohesion of the world across disciplines. There are many forces nowadays, especially becoming even more visible now in this time of pandemics, where we are working on supremacy technology here and there is a lot of national rhetoric, piling up. And I think we as scientists, we should really maintain our global attitude for science and engineering. And I believe that this is even more important now than ever.
Well, this is a great statement to conclude for today's chat. Professor Dustdar, many thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I'm really looking forward to your keynote talk in November. And for all the viewers, I suggest please check our website for more information as well on Professor Dustdar and his speech, but also on all the aspects of the conference. Thank you and see you in November.
Thank you very much.